Comrades, I am Admiral Andre and I greet you back to Kerbal Space Program on this lovely morning. The sun has risen just a short while ago and the Kerbals here are ready to go. So what is on the agenda for today? Last time we launched the Venera 1, it's still in orbit. I have not advanced time just to the next day. So the launch window for the actual Eve trip will still be quite a long way away. But I thought in the meantime, actually, there's a couple of things that we can do. The first thing is, despite what I said before, I really couldn't help myself and I went back to tweak the Luna 3 probe again. But I think it looks even better now. So maybe we can send that on another flyby. But then also we never sent an impactor to Minmus either. So that's another thing we can do. But apart from that, I thought it is also time to actually get started on the manned missions, or I guess you could say the Kerbal missions. And of course there the obvious choice will be Vostok, because we have already been working on the R7. So it's a very small jump to actually just get it ready for a manned flight. So first things first, let me just show you what I did with the Luna probe, or the Luna 3 specifically. So let me just load it up. And I think I saved this as Luna 3C. Last time I called it the one that I tweaked again, Luna 4, but Luna 4 is something completely different. So this is actually Luna 3B. Now Luna 3C it's exactly the same. I changed nothing with the rocket or anything below the fairings. All that I did was I actually just made a smaller central section. So instead of having this tank, well, it's not a tank anymore, it's emptied out, I used the smaller one like that, the FLT 100, because I think it better represents the proportions used in the real Luna 3. Then also remember how I said that we didn't face our camera, pretending of course this is a camera, but this is where it was on the real probe. We didn't face that towards Minmus, and of course there was a way to control the orientation of the actual spacecraft. Let me quickly show you on the internet again. So I've got all the Vostok things open here, so I just need to actually go to Luna 3 again. There we go. Now this is a bit well hidden because I was looking at a lot of these graphs, but then I was thinking, you know, there must be some way to control it. And if we look at this, for example, this diagram here, this shows nothing in terms of RCS. It's all of the science and so on. So it's actually something that's relatively well hidden. It's not quite obvious. So I think what I did was I actually searched for diagram. And somewhere here I got one that actually showed something interesting, but if I can actually find that now, get some very weird things that have nothing to do with anything, or at least not very obviously. No, this is the one that shows nothing. What about this one also? Oh no, this is the one, yes. You see, it shows nitrogen microjets. This is just like with the Venera probe. This does have some small RCS nozzles on the bottom. But from this image I couldn't quite figure out how many. It doesn't look like it has any on the top here, or of course in the middle. The camera was of course on the top, so they wouldn't want anything near there. But it doesn't look like there are any nozzles. But there's one. It's not actually these things here. This is a solar direction sensor. It's this little protrusion here. So that's one, and there's one on the other side, but I doubt if it would just be two, because you can only then basically pitch, for example. You can't yaw or anything like that. So another figure I saw somewhere, basically it would just show the same thing. If we just look at this one again, it doesn't show any of the nitrogen microjets here, but you do get these little things. So I would at least expect there would be 4 of them, so that you can orientate the craft. So anyway, that's what I did. I added the 4 basic RCS ports to the top here, and then I just put a tank inside, one of the small ones, you know, the 60, the roundified one. So we can of course reduce that. 60 monopropellant is way too much, so we can just make it something like 20 or 18, it doesn't matter. And basically I think that completes it. I'm not going to mess with this anymore. We have to move on from Luna 3, but it looks so nice and I just can't help myself. So there we are. Now of course Luna 3, what happens when I don't press shift? There we go. So let's just see, is there anything else? This one is still half empty and all of that. This is exactly the same configuration as before, but this time at least we'll have a little bit of control. And of course the probe that we used inside the Luna 3 doesn't have a reaction wheel, so it must use the RCS to basically maneuver itself, which is what I want exactly. But of course it can use SAS and so on. So I again think maybe, you know, just flying by, let's say the moon and Minmus. I want to try and reach both of them, you know, one of those double flybys basically. But in this one I'm just going to speed it up again 3 times like I've done before, and just let you enjoy some music as well. So let's hope this one goes well. And is everything good to go? I think so. And I'll see you outside in the on the launch pad. Okay, so I think that will do. I will stop yammering right now and let you enjoy the action. So let's go. Well, we are here in orbit now, but I'm thinking this is probably going to be a fail because we don't have enough fuel. I think the addition of that extra monopropellant tank there maybe threw things off a little bit. But this tank is of course empty, but we don't have even 700 meters now per second. But let's see what we can do. Maybe we can at least get close. Oh well, it's another one of our many failures, I suppose. Definitely not enough fuel. It shows you amazingly how much difference it can make if you add just a little bit of weight. So I'll leave this one as another failure, just like our Luna 1. And let's just move on to building the Vostok. I think that will be the next main objective for today. So at least this new design did fly. It didn't get very far, of course, but nevertheless, I just had to use it, you know. So let's start from scratch. Here we go. Now, to build the actual Vostok capsule, and I think this one, the first time we use it, it will be the Kerbal Sputnik. So let's just go to the internet again and have a quick look at what we have to do. So here we go. This is just, of course, the Wikipedia again, but this is now the final Vostok. But I think the Kerbal Sputnik was actually the same thing. Let me actually search for it here. Okay, yes. It was a Soviet. It paved the way for Vostok 1. The second attempt to launch a Vostok capsule with dogs on board. So it was a Vostok capsule. It obviously just had other occupants, not humans, but it's exactly the same thing. So let's just have a look. So obviously that means we will need a probe core in this thing, a basic one at least, to just help it to have an automated flight. Since we know that Yuri Gagarin and the others didn't do too much in the actual Vostok capsule, the computer controlled the flight for the most part anyway. But of course in Kerbal it's different because the Kerbals like to get involved. So there we are. Now this is basically what it's going to look like, and of course we can't reproduce this exactly, and it's like I said before, it's getting more and more difficult as we go along to actually reproduce these things with our stock Kerbal parts. And for example, when it gets to Soyuz, I'm not even going to do that one. I think we'll just go to Apollo because it's much easier for obvious reasons. So for this one we need a round sphere basically for the occupant. Then we need the small section here with tanks. Now this had oxygen and nitrogen for life support and propulsion. For us, of course, it will just be propulsion. Then it has this area, you can see there is a sort of a maneuvering jet or thruster, I suppose, on that side as well. Then it goes wider out, then it goes back in, then it has the antennas here and the engine, or at least the retro engine on the bottom. And of course tons of antennas all over the place, which we don't necessarily need all of them, but at least we can have a couple of them. So here we get another view of the same thing. So it's the sphere with all of these smaller spheres around, then it goes out, then it goes back in, and then we have the engine. Then we have the hoop antennas on the bottom. Some longer antennas, I think, just all over, you know, on the sides and so on. But let me actually just have a closer look at this thing. Of course, I don't know if this is now a perfect representation of the Vostok, but it looks like it has some, what are those? It looks like an RCS port there, but I'm not sure. Doesn't show anything else. So maybe if I just search, for example, for a Vostok diagram, we could get some more information. Let's pick this one, although it looks a little bit too much detail, and it's all covered here. So the actual insertion module, the upper stage, is going to be quite short, so actually much shorter than we used for the Molniya rocket, or the Venera at least. So it will have, I guess, what are these? Again, those four kind of gimbaling engines along the edges, and then the center engine. And then what else do we see here? See, here's another kind of side picture. These must be kind of like maneuvering thrusters, so they can pitch and so on. See, now this one is later on the Soyuz. Now I can't recreate this because we can't get 3 people or 3 Kerbals in there, and I can't reproduce that shape with another, you know, orbital module and things like that. So it gets a bit complex. But this one I'm confident I can do reasonably well. So yes, I guess let's just have one more look. Okay, that's impossible to see anything. So for the actual rocket again, see, I've got it open here somewhere, the family. There you can see again, it has a very short upper section there. And here of course is the rocket family we looked at the beginning. The test vehicle, the Sputnik launcher, the Vostok launcher. So essentially again, the lower stage is the same with the boosters. It just has then again that gap with a small upper stage that I would say is about half the length of this section, which is sticking out above the boosters, and then it has the capsule with a fairing all over the capsule, but actually not over the upper stage itself. So let's see if we can reproduce that. Now of course this capsule won't do. This is for Mercury, which we can do a bit later. So I was thinking, let's use the lander can. I know it's not strictly a re-entry vehicle, but it will work for our purposes. And the reason I want to use this is, I know it's more square than round, but you can see it does have the beginnings of a round-ish shape at least. Certainly much more than that, for example. So we can certainly enhance that feature by just putting that one on top and the adapter. Okay, anyway, it's going to be different on the bottom because we need a heat shield. This one definitely needs a heat shield, otherwise it will burn up. So just the 1.25 meter heat shield, and that already looks more spherical. And of course it's the same from all the sides. So I like this one. This one will work for Vostok. Then in terms of the parachute, I know the pilot had to jettison before the Vostok capsule hit the ground, but it still had a parachute, and I'm just going to put the small one on the top here. Of course, if I EVA the Kerbals, they might not survive, so we're going to have to land in the capsule. That's just one of those compromises. So as it is now, I don't like how this is sticking out so much, so I'm just going to lower it slightly into the just slightly, you know. I don't want it to be like totally hidden inside there, just so it sort of complements the roundishness of the whole thing. Now let me think. I was thinking of a couple of options here. The first one is the TR18A stack decoupler. I can put it on directly over the heat shield like that, but there's a reason I would rather want it to be, oh, I just picked the heat shield. There. Want it to be like that, so it has this little fairing section right there. Because that will now give us a large gap here that I can actually move stuff up into, since it's empty anyway. Now to recreate that sort of a, I don't even know what you would call that shape. It's like a funnel, and then it's a reverse funnel. So to do that, I was thinking the best option is actually to use the interstage fairing, if I can find it, and then obviously we just reverse it upside down. I'm not going to build it right now because there's something I want to put in here first, and that's the service bay. We don't actually need the service bay, of course, but I just want to use it because it just makes it easier. There's no real reason. I can just slap the things right onto the fairing plate here, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So for a basic control, I want the Probodobodyne Octo 2, which of course does not have a reaction wheel, but it can do the very basic SAS orientations. So I can actually just bring up the information. So it has prograde, retrograde and so on, but again no SAS, so this is perfect. Then I want a battery, of course, since we don't have solar panels on this craft, and I'm thinking maybe 2 of these smaller ones will just be fine. There we go. This is after all a very short-term spacecraft. It's not for very long durations. Now all I have to do is add the engine. Now there's a couple of issues here. First of all, of course, the only real option for adding those spheres around the side will be the monopropellant roundified tank. So these things are actually becoming very useful now, I must say. So having about 8 of them around here somewhere, I'm just putting a rough, this is just for the rough design of it. That will work. I like that. We can move them in slightly as well. Now, of course, this is too much fuel, so we'll reduce this. But that automatically means using a monopropellant engine is the logical choice. Since we have all of this capacity for fuel, we don't have to add another fuel tank. And of course there we have just the one choice, the O10 Puff monopropellant engine. Now I know it's radial, but we can put it down there in the middle and sort of get it to actually have a nice straight center of thrust there. And it's not overpowered. I know it looks big. It certainly looks bigger than the Spark if you compare the two, but the max thrust in a vacuum is the same, 20 kilonewtons. So I'm perfectly happy to use this. And there again, I know we have to have some creative license in terms of this recreation. It will not be perfect. It can never be perfect. So there we go. We just try to do what we can and enjoy the experience. Now, the reason I want to add this first is, well, you'll see in a second. So let me just actually, I've got the snap on there. Now, I know it's a little bit of a problem to actually put this on. So I'll just do it one on the side. Then at least I know it's in the middle along this axis. The next step is to rotate it so that it looks like it's generally firing straight down. More or less. You see, okay, it's definitely still offset a little. And here there's a lot of guesswork involved, so we're going to have to test this. That's why we do the Kerbal Sputnik first without a crew. Then all I do is move it somewhere in the middle here. Now again, this is not perfect, but we will have a guide in a second, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So okay, there we go. It's there, and it's reasonably good. Now we build the fairing. The first thing that I thought of is actually to use this again, the adapter, and then put the engine on there. But it's not really necessary because we can just use the fairing. But let's try it both ways and see how it goes. So firstly, it has to go out. Now, not too far, so let's say about there-ish, if it will accept it, of course. And then back in roughly about there. Let me just close this. There we go. So you see we're getting somewhere. We're not quite there, but this is working in my book. Now we can also actually see that the engine is not perfectly centered because the fairing shows it's a bit uneven there. So that's the guide thing I was talking about. Now the reason I don't want to use the adapter here, if we just go back to the actual Vostok again, you can see the engine is actually sunken into the structure here. There is like this, but it's just a continuation of this, cone shape. But if I have another picture perhaps, like this one, you see there isn't a huge engine nozzle sticking out the bottom. It's reasonably small there. So having the fairing cover half of it actually reduces the relative size that we can see of the engine. So we don't have a huge engine sticking out here and making the whole thing look terribly unbalanced. Of course, if we look at it from the bottom, the fairings meet in the middle there, which would block the nozzle. But again, this is just we have a bit of creative license, so we'll just sort of bypass that. Now this must not be a staged fairing, so now it becomes a structure essentially because we can't jettison it. So let me now think. This is where the moving of things actually came in. And I did test this before the video just so I could see if I could even do this in the first place. So if I move this up like that, obviously there's a gap in there, so we're not clipping into the heat shield and there won't be problems with jettisoning it. Just a little bit up there, just so we don't have such a huge gap here in the middle. Just enough for the spherical tanks. Now I guess 8 of them will do. Let's put them like that. And then, so you see we're getting closer now. Then I just move them a bit down. Let's see, what now? Actually, if I move them further in, it will start really clipping into the tank there or into that area, and I don't want that. So I think that pretty much covers it. If we can actually maybe just a little bit more, something like that. I must say I don't think that's bad. Given the limitations of stock KSP, I think we're actually on a good path here. So now the next step is to just sort out this engine here, because we can see it's not exactly in the, in the right spot. Okay, it's more and more skew, almost there, a bit more to the left. Yes, you see now it looks more or less level there, where the fairing goes into the nozzle. So we'll test this and see if the center of thrust is completely not where it's supposed to be. It might still be a little bit angled there, but okay, we'll try it. We've got some basic SAS, and then of course we have the monopropellant as well. But this is now where things get a bit interesting, because if we go back to the figure again, somewhere here we have to have those kinds of nozzles, otherwise we can't really rotate the craft. For example, when it's time to re-enter, we certainly need to swing it around. So there must be some kind, and I'm sure this is what these things are. This would be like the monopropellant jets again. It would just have 4, just like Mercury, or more or less like Mercury. I don't think it needs to roll really. That wouldn't be so much important. But anyway, let me just have a look. We can always add some more thrusters to it. See what this one shows. It's pretty much the same thing, and it's hard to tell because there's so many things happening here. But anyway, so we have the 4 antennas on the bottom, and then 4 on the top there, and a couple on the side. So the ones on the top I think must be the extendable ones, because when we re-enter I don't want them sticking out there. So let's actually add them while we're looking at them. So they're pretty much pointing straight up. Something like that. I know it's not perfect yet. Not that it ever will be perfect. I mean, we can't recreate it exactly. So something like that. A little bit more out. I think that looks decent. Then of course we extend them. Like that. Okay, they're still slightly orientated towards the center here. There we go. I like that. So we'll stick with that. And what else? Let's see. On the bottom there are also 4. Now we don't have hoop antennas, but we can maybe use the Communotron ones again. They'll stick out here, but these are not very long antennas anyway. So let's just take 4 again and use the snap. And now I just have to sort of see what we can do. They again point straight down. Now of course that's not enough, but we just move them out. And it's not on the axis. Just go back to the snap, and that should do. So now we can just play around with it. Is it still not right? No, it's still not right. Hey. When it comes to this 4 times symmetry, it looks like it's right, but is it? It should be. I mean, no, it's not actually. This is actually a feature of the antenna, it looks like. Maybe if we put it on the outside, but again, that's also like that. That should now be balanced. There we go. And already that looks much better. So we can now play around with it. So if we see, it does sit pretty far to the outside edge there, so let's just make sure that we don't put it too close to the engine. And actually where it is right now is not very bad. No, because it mustn't now stick up above the fairing there. And I know, of course, these blocks in the middle now don't look quite right. But I mean, that's sort of like a hoop-ish antenna, I guess. We can always just move it back up, I think. Pretty much end up where we started again. But I think that does look nicer.